Hello everyone and welcome to This Nintendo Life. It's a podcast on the internet about video games, mainly Nintendo, and I'm NBZ. I'm the host of this here show, if you didn't realise, and now you know, it's some good information to get out there, but I'm not the only person on the internet who talks about video games. There's at least one more. His name's Bally. Bally joins me today. Hello, good sir, how are you?
Hi, NBZ. I'm very good.
Feeling a little hungover?
Busy weekend. Hungover. Oh, always.
Bally is in a perpetual state of being hungover, just the way that he lives. He lives high and loose, tell you what. Fun times. But I'm still here for the podcast. I'm still feeling good. I'm feeling ready to go. Been playing. We're on
stuff.
a schedule, man. We keep a tight ship here.
Tight
so
ship.
Gotta roll with it, and that's what we're doing today. We're going to be talking about video games, Nintendo, all that fun stuff. Bally, how about you tell the fine folks at home what is ahead of us?
We have what we've been playing. We're going to talk through a few emails, and then there was some new stuff came out that we want to talk about. Most notably, My Nintendo and Miitomo. Or Miitomo, or however many ways you want to pronounce that.
If I was as prepared as one John Lindemann, I would have opened the show with my me talking. Unfortunately, not quite as classy as him. But I'm sure
that is funny.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have some fun things to talk about when we get to the Miitomo section of the show. But for now, let's kick things off. Bally, you've been back to Kanto, I've heard.
Yes.
Seems like a little bit of a return to your origins as a Pokemon master.
Definitely. If there was one thing that I wanted to be more than anything when I was about 11, it was a Pokemon master. So
yeah, clearly.
I was so keen to be a Pokemon master that I slogged my way through those first 5 gyms. And then I gave up.
Yeah.
but
well, you know,
I
was just better than you, Bally. So there's no point even trying. You know, clearly.
You were just better than me. I mean, I never completed Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow, even though I owned all of them.
It's not like I used glitches and tricks and the rare candy and Masingo and all that stupid stuff. No way.
God.
You know, I never touched that. No, I was a good child, of course. Clearly.
Let's just level 100 everyone and beat the Elite Four. So anyway. I finished up Pokemon Red on the Virtual Console.
You didn't actually talk about it last time.
No,
I
didn't. And I had a really good time with this game. I probably played about 20 hours worth. I was very, very skeptical going in, thinking, I know it's the first in the series, but I'm not sure it'll necessarily hold up. When you think how many games there have been after the very first game, and you think how many little things they've changed just to smooth out cracks and improve elements, you kind of think, wow, the first version must be terrible, but it's actually really, really good. Like, it holds up incredibly well. So, like, in general, I was just I picked a team of 5 guys, and I just decided...
And a Gigalith, right?
5 guys. I just stuck with 5 guys.
Unfortunately, Gigalith doesn't make an appearance in the original Pokemon games.
Not at all. Most of my guys were like Pokemon that you get gifted or given or you buy and things like that. So I had like a Magikarp very, very early on in the game from the guy who... There's an old man before Mount Moon, I believe, who just sort of says, would you like a Magikarp for 500 quid? And it's just like, yeah, sure. So then that became my Gyarados, which was like one of my main guys, and I managed to get a Dratini very early on because I got him at the game corner. I got given a Hitmonlee at the Fight Club, and then obviously I had Charmander from the start. So all my guys...
So basically what you're telling me is that you are kind of an entrepreneur here. You're not really a Pokemon master. You're not going out into the field and throwing balls at anyone. You're just like exchanging cash over counters and somehow getting Pokemon for it.
Exactly. And it worked really well. So those are my 5 dudes. There's one more. Yeah, I had a Pikachu that became a Raichu.
Was that you get that quite early on, right, in the Viridian Forest?
Yeah, you get Pikachu in Viridian Forest. He's quite rare, so I wanted one of them. Those are my 5 dudes. They had a really good balance, and I just stuck with them throughout the whole game. Annoyingly, I had to bring around Pidgeotto, who I had early on, because Dragonite and Charizard don't learn the move Fly, which is really, really annoying.
Yeah, we were talking about this, and we're like, okay, so let's look on Cerebi, how many Pokemon learn Fly, and we're like, okay, so Doduo and Dodrio get Fly, but for some reason, the thing with giant wings doesn't. Like, Charizard, for some reason, can't. It's so ridiculous. Especially because you have the anime where he's flying all the time.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, like I said, it's an unbelievably solid RPG in general. I think the way that the game, it's just such a well-designed game. Like, and I mean, like the town layout. There's sort of including stuff like, it's almost like boss rooms. And I'm not talking just about the gyms. I'm talking about like Silphco and different areas in the game that often involve Team Rocket. They're like real tough grinds, tough almost dungeons and puzzles, and working out where to go, finding keys, going to one part, going to another. Like, it's really tough stuff, some of it, and I had to go to a guide a couple of times.
Yeah, I think in that original Pokemon game, there is so much more of the more, like, traditional RPG-esque, like, Final Fantasy-esque dungeon areas, apart from their, like, you know, company buildings and this stuff, but they still have those...
Yeah.
You know, different places, find the key, a lot of enemies, you have to make sure you bring potions to heal, because it's a pain to go out to the Pokemon Center. Totally has that vibe to it. And I think over time they kind of shed some of those aspects, and it became more of its own identity. But yeah, like thinking back on it, lot of kind of caves and dark areas that you go through that feel much more in a traditional kind of Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy realm of things.
Yeah, definitely, and they're like you said, it's done on purpose to stop you going back to Pokemon centers easily. Like it's forcing you to fight trainers back to back, to jump through hoops, and to prove that you know what you're doing with your Pokemon and actually progressing in the game. And it's just a really clever way of doing that core mechanic. And of course, like I think, like I was saying about the design of the towns, I think the way that, you know, Cerulean is sort of north, Vermilion is south, Lavender Town is east, and then west you got Celadon, and then Saffron is in the middle. Like those 5 towns that you spend most of the game in, to be honest, like going between them, and it's very clever the way that Saffron's blocked off in the middle through sort of underground tunnels and stuff like that. It works really well just to say, actually, you need to explore this place, then you get this thing, you go back to this town, then you do this thing, and it just works so nicely. Like I don't really remember other Pokemon games having such synergy in the way those towns are designed.
Yeah, I think it's something maybe they carried on to some extent, but for certain, the idea of the Game Boy games, because they were like lacking color and stuff until the Game Boy Color eventually came out, I think they had to place kind of a fine focus on the layout and making sure that they all looked different, despite the fact that the assets between them were very similar. Like all the houses look exactly the same, and so how do you make the town stand out and memorable and recognizable as this town as opposed to that one? And a lot of that has to do, you know, with that layout stuff and making sure they all link and feel different. So I think they do a great job of that, certainly.
Yeah, and I think the end game is incredibly satisfying as well. Like I said, I've never gotten to the Elite Four in the original game of Red and Blue, so I was surprised that it's not an Elite Four and then Lance and then the champion. It's Lance is actually part of the Elite Four. I forgot that.
He's the 4th member. Yeah.
Yeah, I was surprised that there were that many rather than him as being the extra person. But anyway, like it was cool. I like that system, and all my guys were quite underleveled. I say, I got my Dragonair, to level 55 on purpose to evolve it. It learns Hyper Beam, like that was my main guy, and then everyone else was on around like level 45 or so, and I just went for it, and like I did bring Hyper Potions, Revives, and all that stuff, so I was using those a little bit throughout, but didn't have too many issues in terms of that. I do think that's partly because I do actually know quite a lot about Pokemon compared to perhaps the average Pokemon player. So I know who are the most powerful guys, what moves to use, what's special versus physical, that sort of thing. And it wasn't too difficult at the end, which was quite nice.
Yeah, certainly like using your expertise to help you through, as opposed to other JRPGs where I feel you think you're a little bit in the deep end sometimes.
Definitely. And like I said, Xenoblade is like one of the more heavy
right.
RPGs.
I'm going to talk about an RPG after we talk about this, which is far more user-friendly than Xenoblade. And like, we're just talking about this, like, Bally, when you finally get around to playing some other ones, I think that you're going to be pleasantly surprised by how simple the systems are, as opposed to, like, the gargantuan expanse that is Xenoblade and its successor. It really has thrown you into the deep end,
I know
unfortunately.
What you mean. And ultimately, Pokemon is actually quite complex in many ways. Like, if you go into it blind, it is quite a lot to take in, and there are some brutal parts of this game in terms of, wow, that guy is powerful, and like the constant appearance of Gary throughout the game. You really notice, like, oh, I wasn't expecting that, and it's like the game just testing you how good you are when you're not prepared. And I only got whited out once in the game, and it was right at the start when you can sort of walk west towards the Indigo Plateau, and Gary just sort of appears, and this is like, he's got like a level, I don't know, 10 or 15. For me it was a Squirtle, and then he just absolutely annihilated me. But otherwise I didn't have too many issues, and like I said, my team, guys like Dragonite, Gyarados have some of the best stats in the game, so I knew that I wanted some heavy hitters, and like
it was all kind of tipped in your favor anyway, despite the fact that you weren't like super over leveled for the Elite Four. Like, you can take items in there, and you'll have enough cash by that point to kind of, you know, buff your way through without having to worry, I guess. Yeah,
exactly. So it's such a great experience. I'm so glad I played this like on the Pokemon 20th anniversary, and I know
right.
I think this game, having played it, it will continue to go down in history and remain a solid game. And like, I'm so glad Nintendo finally decided, let's release this on Virtual Console. And I'm not interested in doing any of the multiplayer and linking up and stuff and trading. Can't really be bothered with any of that. But it's so
well,
nice
you need to really know someone in real life who also does it, because I don't believe there's Wi-Fi integration in these versions. It's just local. So
they're trying to replicate the link cable as much as possible.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah, so that's nice that they did that. But overall, such a solid game. If you haven't played it, but I'm sure most people who are listening to this have, if you haven't, I'd highly recommend checking it out, or even going back to it, because like I said, trust me, it is aged better than you might anticipate.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Pokemon, because we talk about like the two eras of the Game Boy. It's like pre-Pokemon and post-Pokemon. And pre-Pokemon, you have a lot of kind of very basic, simple games, a lot of platformers. I think Pokemon really changed the game, and it was so huge in scope and so crazy that it really pushed people to make bigger, better stuff for that system. So, yeah, it's an achievement, an accomplishment, and I have played it a few times myself. So I of course know very much about those originals.
The good old Pokemon.
Good old days. Yeah, have you been playing anything else then, Bally?
I also played a PlayStation 4 game.
Oh my goodness gracious, Bally, when did you buy a PS4? Everyone is asking.
I didn't. I was just at a friend's house in London, and this friend had Firewatch.
Yes.
And he was like, Bally, Firewatch is only like a 4-hour long game. While you're staying with me just for the weekend here in London, why don't you just play through the whole thing? And I was like, you know what? I think I should. I've heard a lot about this game. I've been intrigued by it. I want to give it a go. So let's do it. So I'm going to go full spoilers here, I think.
Okay, well, we will leave down in the description of the YouTube video and in the podcast description, I will put a link for you to skip to the time when the spoilers end. So if you want to skip past this section and you don't want to hear anything about Firewatch because you want to play it later or something like that, just go to the description and it will tell you the timestamp at which it ends. So we'll give you a couple of seconds and ready. All right, let's go. Bally,
okay.
What is going on with Firewatch? And I should also state, I've not played Firewatch, and I'm going to be spoiled here, but I'm also going to tell you, remember, ladies and gentlemen, I suffer from motion sickness real bad in games, which are first-person and are not shooters. And as a result of that, I probably won't play Firewatch because it is a first-person walkie-about game. So, yeah. All right, Bally, off you go.
Cool.
Tell me about Firewatch.
So the story starts. First of all, if you don't know what it is, it's a first-person game. It's like an interactive storytelling game almost, but you're still sort of exploring a game world, and fixed points happen, and there's sort of a linear story that comes through the whole game. So you play as this dude called Henry, and you hear Henry's backstory at the very start of the game. So basically, him and his wife have been having a hard time. Basically, she has very early in life dementia. They're like meant to be in their 40s, I believe. So she's got dementia, and then their relationship starts going downhill because like it just gets really tense, and like her parents start not liking Henry and decide actually his wife should live with them, not him. So they're sort of having a break almost, and he's having a bit of a shitty time, and he's like, right, I need to get away from all this.
Live in the woods.
I'm gonna go live in the woods and become like a fire watcher. So you start as a fire watcher, and then you basically have this girl speaks to you on the
walkie-talkie.
On the walkie-talkie, that's the one I'm looking for. The walkie-talkie, and she's called Delilah, and she's like your main point of call throughout the whole game. And essentially, she starts sort of teaching you the ropes of what you have to do, how your job works, and then basically your sort of job takes a dark turn. Okay. So stuff starts happening, and then you start realizing that someone's following you, and then you basically go through all these clues to find out that someone's following you. And I should say, all the time, like, you and Delilah have great chat, like great banter, like it's really great script writing and really great acting as well, and it's just such a joy to hear their stories back to each other. But so you'll do some very boring, collect the wood, go do this, go build that, and then gradually these darker elements start coming in, and then Henry basically says to Delilah, he's like, there's someone following me, like what's going on? And gradually, like, more unfolds. And there's one point that's really quite creepy where you're walking along, and then you just hear, and then you just get like beaten over the back of the head and knocked out, and you're like, what the hell just happened? What is going on? And then basically the story unfolds. It turns out there's this guy, and you've discovered like lots of bases that this guy has got across the world map. It's really quite creepy at times. So, and you're always scared that you're going to actually run into him and like something bad's going to happen. So this guy has bases all across the world map with like letters and telecommunications with like noting your name and Delilah's name. Like he knows about you two and like where you are and been following you. And the reason that this guy is following you is basically he's got his own backstory. This guy was a previous expert hiker or something, and he was with his son, and basically him and his son were hiking, and you never find out what the cause was, but it's believed, and I believe this to be true, that through an accident, basically his son died while they were hiking. Like he falls down this it's like a cliff face, but leads into a cave, and you actually find the son's body. Like that's one of the final moments.
Jesus Christ!
You find the son's body, and you're like, oh my god, what is going on? But basically, you never find the guy, and you and Delilah make this decision, like, you know what? Basically, this guy is just trying to cover up. He doesn't want anyone to know about him. He just wants to run away from the world. He doesn't want to try and defend himself like in a court to prove that he didn't murder his son or anything. He just wants to escape to the wilderness, basically, and live in these bases for the rest of his life. So you basically decide, I'm just going to let him do that. And that's essentially the whole game, to be honest. But here's the thing, is that that's one thing, but you're constantly thinking, like, what's going to happen with my wife, and like with Henry's wife, and you're like, what about this girl Delilah? She seems cool, and like this all happens. So then like, so at the end of the game, this guy's been starting fires to like try and get you to leave him alone, and eventually one of the fires gets really bad, and you have to evacuate. So the girl on the line, Delilah, she's like, oh, come to my come to my Firewatch tower and I'm gonna send down a helicopter. And you're like, at the end of the game, you're like running along. Everything's been worked out. You've already found the body and stuff. And then you're running along and you're like, oh, I'm going to meet Delilah. I'm going to meet Delilah. And then it's like, you get to her Firewatch tower. And she's just like left a message like, oh, hey, yeah, my helicopter came earlier. I'm already like gone. And then you're like, oh, I thought you'd be here. And she's like, yeah, don't worry, another helicopter's just coming. And then you're like, okay, well, it was nice knowing you, Delilah. I hope that, like, maybe we can hang out when I'm back home and stuff. And then you're, like, having this awkward radio call with her. And she's like, oh, yeah, I think I'm really busy, like, right now. And I'm not going to be able to see you or something.
Oh,
and then, like, you get in the helicopter and the game ends. And you're just like, wow, what was that about? And like she's just so sort of cold at the end. It's really weird.
I've heard a lot of people complain about the ending. It seems to divide people generally. I don't know if they're trying to make some sort of statement there about something like deeper than like the storytelling itself, about like loss and about like relationships between people and that kind of thing. And I think that maybe that won't sit well with some people who want like, a story resolution as opposed to kind of a metaphysical like introspection.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, MBZ. Like, it's the whole game guides you. Like, it sets up so much. I was disappointed on both accounts. I was disappointed about the Delilah relationship. I was also disappointed about this dude. Like, I mean, maybe that story did sound quite telling interesting when I laid it out just there. But it's actually not. It doesn't feel as big and dark as it implies for most of the story. Like, you're kind of thinking, oh god, like there's some sort of conspiracy, like this is bigger than that, and it actually just turns out to be one guy who's had a bit of a crap time and mucked stuff up. So I don't know. It's just the game feels like it's leading to something bigger than it does on two accounts, like I said, and it's weird. And I've not even mentioned the art style and the graphics. This game is absolutely beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful art styles I've seen in a game. It's almost semi-cel shaded, but not. It
feels like quite chunky in terms of the character.
It's quite
like
chunky.
His hands and stuff.
Yeah, his hands are quite chunky, and just the animations of all this stuff, and the presentation is just impeccable, like really great. But yeah, it's a weird game. It's not a satisfying game to play. I don't know.
It's a very different thing from anything you've really played before as well. It's very narrative driven. It's a first person walk around game. A lot of these are becoming very, very popular. People referring to it very negatively as walking simulators and that kind of stuff. Did you like feel you'd play another game similar to this, like a Gone Home or something? Did it intrigue you enough? Or
I definitely would, and I know for a fact that other games like this have better, more satisfying, not maybe necessarily satisfying in a positive way, but sometimes a very sad ending. And this kind of was a relatively sad ending, but it wasn't a sad ending. It wasn't a wholesome sad ending. It was just a funny, weird sad ending. It wasn't it just wasn't satisfying. And you're right, maybe that's what they were going for, is that, trying to build this relationship up that you have with Delilah throughout the whole thing. And there are some really like emotional moments that they have over the radios and stuff, and it's done really well, and you feel like you're on a different level with her or whatever, and then it is very cut short, and it's weird, and maybe that is the point of the game. And that's just a terrible like life situation to be in. The idea that you could be in your 40s and your wife has dementia, and like, I mean, do you stay with her and help her and make sure she's okay, or do you try to live your life more? Do you try and go with someone else? And I guess this game is playing with that idea.
Sure.
And it doesn't come to resolution. You're left to think, I don't know. Whatever. Yeah. Maybe I do want to go with her, but now
that's how life works, There's not always resolutions.
It's a tough lesson, and maybe that's the point of this game. But it's a weird one. I'd recommend playing it still. I think it is a great game. It's just a bit strange. Well, now that I've given away the whole game, maybe people would be less.
I'm sure the people who are interested click the skip button.
I hope they did, because, and like I said, it's 4 or 5 hours, very quick. And yeah, I've been talking way too long about this game, but
that's all right.
It's cool. I'd recommend it. I'd like to experience more experiences like this one. And it was cool. It was different. So yeah, that was Firewatch.
Okay, well, that's everything, right, Bally? I know you've started in on the good old Metroid Prime 2, but
yes,
I'm sure you'll have things to say next time about that. Myself, meanwhile, I've been taking a little bit of a break from Stardew Valley. My farm is, it's reached a good point. I've got Leia, not from Star Wars, but this other girl, Leia, who has ginger hair in the game in Stardew Valley, and she's going to be my wife, and I'm going to have to give her a thingy. So I'll do that, and then I'll sort that out. But meanwhile, I was playing a bona fide classic. One might say my biggest embarrassment of my gaming history that I haven't played this video game. I've been playing Final Fantasy VII. And I think I've talked in the past about, like, I don't know if I could ever go back to Final Fantasy VII, you know? It's a PlayStation 1 game. Those are so much harder to go back to than, like, Super Nintendo or older stuff, because 2D holds up so much better. But there are a couple of reasons, Valley, why I'm going back to Final Fantasy VII. Number one, the remake's coming out, and from what we've seen and from what continues to be shown of that game, looks like it's going to be extremely different. And I think that it is valuable to play the original to have context for how different the new version is, and also, it's cool to have the reference point to be like, oh, when I'm playing the remake, I'll know all the stuff that it's referring to and how they've changed it and what's different about it. And I kind of want that for myself. So that's one thing. Two, Cloud in Smash Brothers is a super fucking cool character, and all the stuff and the implementation that Sakurai did and the team did at Namco is real good. It's super cool, and I have felt like playing through this game that I am appreciating that so much more now, like all those aspects of the design that they put into him. And also, it's just, you need to do it. Sometimes you need to say, fuck it, I'm going to play one of these old games, and it may not hold up, but I'm willing to give it a chance. So, the last 33 hours or so of playing Final Fantasy VII, I have to say, it has been surprisingly positive. So, it's weird because the way that the visuals work is they have pre-rendered backgrounds, and what I mean by that is the backgrounds are basically pre-drawn, and they are very kind of blurry and muddy because at the time at which they were implemented back in the day, obviously the resolutions were not that high. So they are kind of like hard to tell what is, backgrounds and things you can interact with. It's kind of helped. I'm not sure if this is an implementation of the Steam version. I'm playing on PC, by the way. But if you click in the right stick or the left stick, I can't remember which one, it points up this arrow over Cloud's head, and it also points up these other arrows to show you, like, this is the door you can go in, this is a rope you can climb. And so, like, that trial and error, like, of sort of nature of going up and pressing something and seeing whether it's interactable or not is kind of bypassed, which is really smart. It means that the game is far more playable, and you can actually get by and not have to worry and look at a guide all the time. But yeah, so it's this weird mishmash, because what they did with the Steam version is they up-resed all the characters, and so all the character polygonal models look super sharp. Like, they're all chunky, obviously, but their resolution is way higher. So it's kind of weird how they're kind of walking around these pre-rendered backgrounds, and it looks a little strange. But I think it works. I think, like, you can definitely tell what's going on. And generally, the environments have been surprising to me, because I come into, like, Final Fantasy games thinking, a lot of the time that they're going to be very traditional fantasy settings, and that's not really the case either in 13 or in 7. There's kind of like the whole background is you're in the city of Midgar, and there's very kind of techie, and it's all about this big company that's trying to take things over, and all the places you go to feel like kind of earthly places. They feel kind of more grounded in reality, as opposed to fantastical, and so that kind of was interesting, because I feel the world is very different from how I kind of perceived it from the outside, like looking in. It looks like all the characters seem very anime, of course. Cloud's hair, the traditional like Japanese archetype of just fucking spikes everywhere that you could like skewer yourself on, and so that kind of maybe a bit before I played it was me misinterpreting. But yeah, visually it's interesting and it holds up. And it's crazy because you have these FMV cutscenes, which at the time clearly blew people's mind. And the characters, like the polygonal models, can move around in them, although the frame rate is like complete garbage when that stuff happens. But it's a neat touch and very weird. But yeah, it's still crazy. That it's all kind of working for me, because I just didn't think it would. I think a lot of the aspects that are positive for me are to do with the battle system and to do with all the kind of overworld traversal and that kind of thing. It's similar to... God, I don't know you have a point of reference for any of these things, but like Golden Sun and Chrono Trigger, in terms of like, there's an overworld and your character model on the overworld is like oversized, and the distance you travel is probably not the real distance, like walking speed wise, and when you go into a town it kind of zooms in on it, right? So it's this weird like perspective thing. A lot of Japanese RPGs do it, but I think the thing that was crazy for people at the time was when they saw this game, it's like, oh shit, it's now all in 3D. So you have like the airship at the end, which you can fly over the whole world, and back in the Super Nintendo days it was all what's the thing that F-Zero does? The fucking Mode 7. Mode 7. It was all Mode 7. So it was kind of pseudo 3D, but now it's full 3D, so it's super cool for people. And I think that's part of the impact that it had overall.
And you think that this is, like, when I was mentioning Pokemon Red, and we were talking about how there's quite a gulf in the RPGs I've played with, Xenoblade being quite a complex one. Are you suggesting that something like a Final Fantasy VII is more simple, it's more straightforward?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, let's talk about gear and combat and stuff. You have one slot for a weapon, one slot for a piece of armor, and then one slot for like a bonus item which will add some stat or something. So you just, all the way through, you have a bunch of characters and you just choose 3 things and you go. It's so simple and so refined. The little bit of complexity, which isn't actually very complicated, is the materia system. So I always heard people talk about, the materia system in Final Fantasy VII was great, I really enjoyed it. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? I don't have any frame of reference. The materia system is basically your spells. So all your magic that you use throughout the game is bound to these slots on your weapons and on your arms and all that stuff. And they're essentially orbs that you slot in, and they level up as you level up as well. So they get stronger as you go along. The smart thing about it, though, is because they level up individual of your character, if you for some reason have to change the party, or because the story allows it, it says like you have to use this party member for this period of time, you can just take all the materia off the current party member you're using and put them on someone else, and they are just as powerful as they were before. So it's like the party members don't have their individual magic spells, you have these orbs that you can interchange between them. And it's super clever, because it means that if you are forced into a situation where you're using a character who you've not leveled up that much, but you have to use them for this segment of the story, you're not high and dry. You're not like, shit, I've never used this guy, I have nothing and I'm fucked. Like, it allows for that stuff to work perfectly well and for you to be able to continue on without having any roadblock. I'll say, like, difficulty-wise, the game is rather easy. I died once in 33 hours. And I think that's a little bit of a combination of the leveling system is very simple. You can get up levels pretty quickly, and grinding isn't that slow. So you can kind of out-level things without really thinking about it. And you also have just a plethora of items at your disposal. You can buy a bunch of healing stuff. You're able to use pretty powerful curing things. And there's also this interesting, one of the materia that I picked up is called enemy skill. And the way that it works is if an enemy hits you with a certain attack, you learn that attack, right? So there are certain areas in the game where you can manipulate enemies and you can make them use an attack on you. And I was looking some guides up because there was like some special spells that you can use. And one of them is called Big Guard. And this spell does the job of haste, which basically speeds up your attack turn, barrier, which is like a protective spell, and like another protective spell. So it does 3 spells in one. It does it to all of the party members, and it means that I don't have to worry about carrying around these individual spells on their own. They're all on this one single thing, and it makes my job a lot easier. So I think because they have those elements, it certainly is made easier for people if they go out of their way to do so. And as a result, like, I have a good strategy when I'm going up against tough enemies, and generally I'm not having trouble, which is great. Like, you want to be able in an RPG to not get hung up on stuff and have to spend hours and hours grinding. And it does a really good job. It's not quite Chrono Trigger in terms of a perfect level grind and not having to go out your way, but it's pretty damn close. And, you know, the story itself, very primitive. The localization is kind of terrible. There are lots of moments when you're like, wait, what the fuck are you even saying? Like, clearly this was translated directly from Japanese into English, and it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So I do think that they're going to change that and fix it for the new version. But, you know, it's a simple story. It's very cool. Like, there are some nice twists that, you know, took me off my feet. And I was like, oh shit, I didn't realize that was going to happen. So overall, like, so positive on it. I'm very close to the end. I'm on what in the PS1 days would be disc 3, because back then it had to be on multiple discs because all the FMV video took up so much space. I'm just before the finale. I'm going to do some side quests to finish up, make sure I have some good weapons before the final boss battle. And I'm good to go. But overall, very good.
Do you now have a better appreciation of, you know, the brand new Midgar stage and Cloud,
yes,
and what on earth is going on when you're grabbing one of those orbs?
Oh yeah, so all the orbs that you grab in the Midgar stage are materia orbs, like spells. So the summons are also orbs that you attach to your arms and everything. And when you use them, every single time there's this ridiculous animation that happens. Like, the more powerful it is, generally, the longer the animation. The most powerful one I have right now is this thing called Bahamut Zero, and it literally, like, zooms out of the earth as this giant platinum dragon fires a fucking laser beam, like, 7 million miles away from Earth and, like, hits the enemy that you're attacking on the ground. It's absurd. And you can't skip any of those animations, so every time you do it, you got to see it. It's fantastic. And one thing that I haven't really touched on, the music, really kicking me in the feels, because I think Final Fantasy music is something that you just absorb naturally as being someone who's into games. Like, you'll hear it places all the time, and like the end of the battle theme, which is like like that theme, constantly happens and is like weird, because it's like, shit, like, this is where it kind of originated. I think it's in older games as well, but, you know, it's definitely doing good stuff for me. The music's great all the way through.
And you're near the end?
Yeah, really close. I think most people beat it in like 38 to 40 hours. I'm at about 33 now. I imagine I'll finish it in like 2 or 3 more, give and take. It depends how much extra stuff I do before the end, which I don't imagine will be a huge amount.
Are you anticipating a really unfair JRPG boss series at the end?
See, I really hope it doesn't do that, because so far it's been so good. It's been so good at, like,
I know where I'm
pitching the
my
difficulty.
Money.
I know you are, but, like, it's been great at pitching the difficulty, and I hope it doesn't flubber on the final landing. I have faith that it doesn't, but we'll see. But yeah, I just want to put fears to rest. If you are afraid of going back to Final Fantasy VII, don't be. I think it holds up really well. It's a fantastic game. And I think the Steam version is pretty good. Some bits of the Steam version are a little bit fucking iffy, I have to say. Like, they have controller bindings that are rigid and you can't change the controller bindings, and some of the button presses are just strange and weird. Playing on keyboard is not something I want to do, so I've been playing with the controller, and it has been a little bit of an awkward time at points. It's like, shit, because it says the button prompts on screen are all like PC commands, but they're not actually the button on the PC. They're just like press OK or cancel, which is something you bind to a PC keyboard, but I can't bind them to a controller, so I have to click all the buttons to figure out. It's a fucking mess. But aside from that, everything is pretty great about it. So, and if you want to watch me start the game, I streamed the first I like 2-3 hours on Twitch, and that's in my archive on my Twitch channel. So if you want to see me reacting to the opening moments of Final Fantasy VII, you can go watch that if you so desire. So there you go, Bally.
Glad you're having a good time with it on your
yes, so am I. I was really
journey
surprised.
through RPGs.
Yeah, no, it is a it's a very big point on my stepping stone as I kind of go through the archives. I think Chrono Trigger was the first big one. This is like the second big step. Who knows where it goes next? We'll find out, I guess. But we'll find out in a different time, on a different show, because that's the end of what we have been playing recently. I think we're just going to take a quick break here, and we will return very quickly with some of your emails. So don't go anywhere. We shall be back.
And we're back. We have a few emails lined up, but before I read a few of the emails that I have lined up, I want to remind you all of the email address, and that is, of course, ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That's ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. And on to the first email, which is from Terrence, who's from North Carolina. Hi Bally and NBZ, my question today is about the next generation of Mario Maker. While the Wii U can be faulted for a ton of things, it has created one new genre for Nintendo, that is the user-created content-driven game. On top of being nostalgic and innovative, it also gives Nintendo the license to make a new game without really making an entire new game. So my question is, do you guys believe this is viable with other Nintendo titles, and if so, which one would you pick? My choice would be Metroid, since Nintendo has apparently forgotten about one of its gems, but series like Mario Kart, Mega Man, and even Castlevania could all benefit from some user-friendly perspective. Still love the show, and thanks for reading my question.
Well, Terrence, thank you for sending it in. I think that this obviously has to do with the nature of NX at a kind of broader level. The thing that makes Mario Maker fantastic is having the gamepad and having the touchscreen and the ability to so easily drag and drop and move things around. It's like, because the gamepad is so perfectly designed to create and then play test on one device, I think that if they were to continue this kind of level creator style genre that they've kind of come up with Mario Maker, it would have to require some sort of similar input device. And I think there have been some rumblings recently. Emily Rogers has been back doing some rumor mills, and we've heard like potentially Mario Maker is going to be on NX, a new version of it perhaps. But yeah, I think we should probably put that out there first, that is necessary. Bally, how do you feel about other series potentially Nintendo taking advantage here? I think an interesting one he brings up is Mario Kart, which I didn't even think about. The idea of like track design, that's something that lots of games have done in the past, but they're kind of more serious races. I think there's a PS Vita or PSP game, I can't remember the name of it now, it came out at launch, but Mod Nation Races, that's what it's called. Mod Nation Races, that has a lot of kind of customization in terms of track design. I think that's like a popular thing in other games, but I'd like to see Nintendo's take it. I think that'd be really interesting with Mario Kart.
I believe the original F-Zero and N64 had like a track editor. that was linked to this extra peripheral that came out in Japan or something. I can't remember what it was called.
Well, they've had stuff like the original Excite Bike, right? You could create your own courses in that as well. So they've dabbled with some of this stuff before in the past.
I could definitely see it working with Mario Kart. Out of the other sort of main Nintendo franchises, I actually think 2D Metroid is probably the next best. Obviously, so many people have tried to make, Metroid-esque levels in Mario Maker, most notably yourself, Nbz.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good level. I think there's things that can be done. Imagine a 2D Metroid Mario Maker style game with, the different palettes, different doors you can implement in different places, different bosses you can stick in different places, do some really crazy stuff. I think that is actually in the realms of possibility. Some people, particularly on Nintendo Voice Chat, a great Nintendo podcast we both listen to, they were talking about this question a while back, and they were sort of humming and hawing with the idea around 2D Zelda, and so I think they sort of came down on the side that it's probably slightly too hard to do. I'd probably agree with that. I think it could work, but I think the level of depth that you'd have to think about in designing those levels could actually be pretty difficult. I think 2D Metroid is a nice balance of puzzle and action, and ultimately a lot of what these 2D Mario Maker levels have become is a nice combination of puzzle and action. And I think that Zelda kind of 2D Zelda especially kind of veers towards a lot more puzzling at times. So I'm going to go with 2D Metroid. I think that could actually work, and I wouldn't be super surprised if it didn't come out in the future.
I'm going to 100% disagree with you and say that neither Metroid nor Zelda are good candidates.
There's a divide. There's a divide.
There is a massive problem. You take a look at Mario Maker right now, and you think about the amount of thought and time and energy that goes into a single level, and thinking about how the player is routed one way and how the player does a certain thing. You expand that to a Metroid or a Zelda, you're doing it on the level of a whole game-sized world, right? Because you can't, like Mario, section it down into this mini kind of singular set-off thing, because those games are so dependent on the fact that you upgrade your character over time, you get different weapons and items, and you progress at a rate that makes sense for that and that world. And by doing a Maker version of those games, it just seems like far too great an undertaking for someone to go and do. You're not going to get the same output as you do with Mario Maker, where you can make a level that is relatively short and do it in an afternoon. This would kind of get on the level of more deep game development, and I don't think it works. I don't think it works at all.
But look at the number of people who wanted the ability to create an entire world in Mario, and look at the number of people who are
that's
out
different.
there.
And I'll tell you why that's different. It's 100% different because Mario's level to level. Each level is different.
Of course it is. I'm not denying that, but I'm saying Metroid.
They're not interlinked.
There are the
they're not
creators
interlinked
out
in
there
whatsoever.
there are the creators out there that can be given the tools to make an entire Metroid game. If you give them the tools that were created for Mario Maker, there is no reason why the same couldn't be done for Metroid. Obviously, there won't be the same quantity of levels. Let me finish. Obviously, there won't be the same quantity of levels, and there won't be the same number of people just jogging on online, creating a level, uploading it. It won't be like that. It'll be, yes, you'll have to divide the game up into sections, but I think people can upload a Metroid section, or they can upload an entire Metroid game, and I think it is doable.
No, it's not. It's 100% not doable. They could try, but here's the problem. The great thing about Mario Maker is that it flips the 99% versus 1% problem. This flips it the complete opposite way back, because once again, you're in a situation where it is much more intimidating to try and create stuff, and the people who do create stuff, sure, it'll probably be good, but then you'll have not that much content to go through, and you're not going to have, relatively... the same amount of stuff as you do. You can't do 100 Mario Challenge style thing. The sorting for that stuff would be much more difficult. It just, for me, it falls completely flat on its face. The amount of design and thought that has to go into routing the player, making sure that they can't break the game, making sure that it works in tandem, it seems way, way too much of an effort. Whereas if you take something like Mega Man or Castlevania, which are 2D based, side-scrolling, you got from left to right, and they have different elements which you can plop down easily and understandably. That makes far more sense to me. The level-to-level based gameplay in this kind of creation tools is what is logical, and the other stuff seems way, way too intimidating and complicated.
I would agree with you if one thing happened, and that one thing happening would have been when Mario Maker came out. It had obviously the same quantity of levels, but the top tier of Mario Maker levels were below what they are. The top tier of Mario Maker levels, the amount of design that has gone into them, and you're trying to tell me that those people couldn't make some of the most incredible Metroid levels. I think it would be crazy.
They could have a go, but it wouldn't take them a week. It would take them months and months to make something.
Of course it would, but these are the kind of people who would do that kind of thing. And I think Nintendo having a game that could segment it, so obviously you've got that, it would be tiered. You have one tier where a noob can just go in, make a quick little 5-minute thing that's probably really bad, obviously, but that's the same with Mario Maker. And then you tier it so that they have the options where these people who want to invest hundreds of hours into making Metroid games can actually give it a go. I think that would be great.
I think if you do that, the problem there is some people make short stuff, and as soon as you make short stuff, you lose what Metroid is. That's no longer Metroid. That is a completely different thing.
Yeah, but you could argue when you make Mario long, it's no longer Mario.
That's
Mario's clock
do.
Doesn't go up to 500 seconds outside of this game, but in this game they said, hey, let's do that. Let's have longer Mario. Let's change the formula.
Right, but 500 seconds versus a small segment of Metroid game are two completely different things. Upping the amount of time that Mario has is minuscule compared to changing the complete design ethos of a Metroid game.
When I say small in Metroid, in a Metroid Maker, it'd still be 10 minutes. It wouldn't be like small.
10 minutes is like some of the longer Mario Maker levels.
Of course they are, but I'm saying the way that you explore a Metroid level is so different to a Mario level. It would take time.
So it would be completely different. Like you would mash up two different styles. You'd have some people making these weird small things and some people making these giant worlds, and there would be a mismatch and they wouldn't work out with one another.
So is your money on Nintendo sticking the Maker sort of franchise solely to Mario? You don't think they're going to branch out to anything else?
At the moment, yeah, it's the one that makes sense. The thing with Mario also is you have all these items that interact in interesting ways with one another. The rules for things like Zelda and Metroid are much more strict. Like, you don't have that interaction between these unique individual elements which can create interesting and kind of unexpected scenarios. I think that's part of the joy of Mario Maker, is having like, what happens if the shell hits this spring which then goes on to that. There is nothing similar to that in those other games, and that's why like it works so brilliantly, and it's why I don't think those levels from a user created perspective would be as interesting in these other things.
I disagree, but I do agree with you that I don't think Nintendo are going to do a Metroid Maker anytime soon. But
no, well, they'd have to make an actual Metroid game first.
Exactly,
that would be nice.
That is the first step, and I'm sure it'll happen soon. We've been saying that like since this podcast started.
Yeah.
And so
every
many
year, still making that
podcasts
prediction. I'll tell you what.
Every year. Okay, so I hope that was a good debate, Terence. Hope you like that.
Sure.
Right. Our next email is from Elias, who's from Germany. Hey MBZ and Bally, my question for you today is, what is the most obscure game you remember playing? A game that the least amount of people know. My example would be Ant-Man 2 for the PC. It's a 2D run and gun game reminiscent of Metal Slug and Gunstar Heroes. I remember it fondly, and after looking at some footage, I think it still looks pretty fun. The weirdest thing about the game is that it was made in Korea, but has German text and a little bit of German sound bits. What a random combination. Anyway guys, thanks for the good podcast. Keep it up.
Okay, I think both of us have played quite obscure games in the past. I think the running theme is that a lot of these are going to be licensed things, and Elias's example is a licensed thing. It's an Ant-Man game, so that's definitely a trend, I think. I think there's lots of these things that just kind of got shit out in like the 90s and like before that. These days, like that generally gets segregated to mobile, so we don't really have franchise spin-off movie games or whatever anymore. Bally, do you have a good example of some weird obscure thing that we played back in the day?
I actually bought the Game Boy Advance version as well as the GameCube version of this game, and they actually linked up. And that was Disney Sports Football.
Wow, hell of a
Or it might
deep
have been
cut
called
there.
Disney Sports Soccer, but it was one of the
Okay.
two. It might have been called Football in Europe, but yeah, it was a really weird sports game. Like it sounds like it was reminiscent of a game like Mario Strikers Charged, but I want to say it probably came out before that game came out.
Okay.
It was a weird one, and like it was a really weird game on Game Boy Advance. It looked horrendous, but it was quite good fun. I remember paying way too much money for that and having an average time on the GameCube version. But the Game Boy
Do you
Advance
remember
game,
how the GameCube and Game Boy Advance versions linked up at all?
no idea. Don't know what they did.
Okay.
Don't know.
But it did use the cable, as far as
Yeah,
I recall.
definitely. And like, I played loads of obscure games back on the PC before I owned anything
Right.
other than my Game Boy. And
Like that Gungan strategy game. Star Wars Episode 1.
Gungan Naboo thing. It was like
Yeah.
it's like an overworld game where you created how many of one race of life form within the Gungan world existed.
It's like an
and
Age of Empires-esque Star
it
Wars
was like
Gungan
Age of
game.
Empires, but it was like all situated around food chains, and you'd have to create the
Oh.
right number, and you could use like stun guns to stun the animals, and if you stun gunned them too much, they would like. I don't know if it was a glitch or meant to happen, but they would just like grow massively after a while
Wow.
and take up the whole screen. So
Okay.
it was so weird. But yeah, and there were other games on PC that were kind of PS1 ports, I want to say. So
Right.
There's like a Spider-Man game I played, which I'm pretty sure came out on PS1, which was
Yeah.
pretty cool, and like Lego Racers and stuff, but everyone knows that game, so that's a bit more mainstream.
Yeah, that's a well-known game. Yeah, I think both of us played Jackie Chan Adventures on Game Boy Advance.
Oh, that is a game.
It's a really
what-
good
what
game,
a beat 'em up.
surprisingly. Yeah, based on the Jackie Chan cartoon.
And it was it emulated that cartoon so well. It had all the bosses and everything from it.
Yes. It was almost like that cartoon was made for a video game. Like all these beasts that were summoned and stuff. Like there were clearly like boss battles waiting to happen. Yeah, it was it's one of the only side-scrolling beat 'em ups that I've ever really got into before. It was really good fun. I enjoyed that game a lot. And I guess probably my deepest cut is Game Boy Color game, which was, I guess, supposed to be for my sister, but I played it. It was Sabrina the Teenage Witch, based on the cartoon that was based on Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Yeah.
So it was like a platformer, like level-based. It was weird, and I finished it. I also like figured out some weird glitches in it on my own. I remember like being in the car one day and being like, "Oh my god!" I like jumped out of the world and started like going into like areas that I shouldn't be able to access. It was very strange, but lots of stuff like that.
Really, a third-party game not being play tested enough like that.
Oh god, yeah, never
Weird.
happens.
Time.
There's some other like DS stuff. When I first started listening to RFN, Johnny was talking about a game called Spider-Man. I think it's Shattered Dimensions on DS, and it's kind of a Metroid-like. And I played through that. It was really fun. I enjoyed that a lot, and it's just this weird Spider-Man Metroid-style game, which I don't know if that many people played it, but I'd never heard of it before. So.
I had Monsters Inc. on the Game Boy Color.
Sure.
That was a bad platformer.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Tell you what, a game I absolutely loved
Mm.
that you made fun of me for years about was
Uh-huh.
Tarzan on GameCube.
Yeah, well,
Like
that
it
weird
was,
party game.
Oh, it was great. It wasn't a party game.
I seem to remember it being lots of mini games and stuff.
It had three main games. Like one of them
Okay.
was running around, one of them was like skydiving, and the other one was like surfing. And it was
Yeah, wasn't it like jumping off a waterfall or something?
it was
Yeah.
cool. Oh god, I like that.
I fucking ripped into you for having that Tarzan game so hard. Oh dear, good times.
Good film too. Good film.
Yeah, good songs in Tarzan. Yeah, is that it? Can you think of any other deep cuts
Oh.
that people may not have heard of?
God, what a deep. I definitely have a few. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire on Game Boy Advance?
Sure, lots of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire games. I don't know if that's the deep cut because people know what Who Wants to Be a Millionaire is.
Yeah,
so.
I guess, but it was such a bad game.
Yeah. Mary Kay and Ashley's Horse Riding Adventures on PS1.
That's
a good
that's
old
a famous
classic
game, though. That's absolutely
right. I myself and Nick popularized it on YouTube. After we did our video on it, so everyone knows about that game now.
I remember my mum buying me Scrabble on Game Boy Color.
Okay.
And it was like, I'm so sick of him playing those games that make his brain dead. Here's one that he'll really like and make him smart. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that. It's just a horrible, horrible game. Horrible.
Yep. Oh. Well, there you go. Lots of horrible games clearly in our past. But yeah, it's weird because back then we kind of just played anything that was given to us, right?
Yeah.
And now that's just not going to happen, really. We're way more selective.
The powers that be that decided what we played were beyond us. So what we played was kind of beyond our power, and that meant that we played a lot of really, really bad stuff. What if it's just one big conspiracy that this is how they try to persuade? It's like a link that the companies have with parents to stop their kids playing video games. Is to just feed them absolute crap.
Right.
Video games, and then by the time they're young people are a bit older, they're like, God, this is crap. I need to stop playing this.
Yep. Didn't work on us though.
Didn't work. We found the good stuff. We found the hidden gems.
Exactly.
They were there, crying to us. Right. Our final email is from Farak, who is from Spain. Hi guys, I'm a diehard fan of the podcast since the very first episode, and this is the second email I've sent to you. So the other day, MBZ posted a top 5 most frustrating boss battles video in his channel, and it made me think about something that's been on my mind for quite some time. You were saying that you went through hell with the final bosses of Xenoblade and Final Fantasy XIII, and it is funny because those were the two bosses everyone was warning me about to the point that it disappointed me how swiftly I beat them. I could barely even listen to their amazing themes. The same goes for the final boss of Dust, even though so far you've been the only one I've heard saying it was difficult. So I have 2 questions stemming from this topic. 1. Have you guys ever had any instance of a final boss or game section being infamously difficult that ended up being really easy for you? Or the other way around? And question number 2. To be fair, my hour count of Xenoblade X clocked at 150 when I beat the final boss. I was also at max level in both Final Fantasy XIII and Dust by the time I got to the final boss. The thing here is that I never actually grinded to get to those levels. I just naturally get to that point by completing side quests and exploring the world at my own pace. Do you think the reason these bosses are this difficult is to punish people for not going out of their way to experience the rest of what the game has to offer? And if you think that it's the case, do you guys think that's fair? I know this email is long, so thank you for your attention. Greetings from Spain, and keep up the good work.
Well, thank you, Farak, for the email. I think let's maybe tackle the second question first, because I think it's more immediate to like the stuff that I was talking about in that video, which if you haven't seen it, I was basically talking about some bosses that made me extremely frustrated. And among those, the end of Xenoblade X, which Bally you still have to look forward to, and Final Fantasy XIII.
You make me want to play more of that game all the time, MBZ.
I think a pattern that has emerged between those boss battles is a lot of them are RPGs. So a lot of it, what it comes down to is, do I have bigger numbers than the boss's numbers, right? Like, it's very much a game of stuff which is somewhere outside of my control, whereas if it was more skill-based, and I think, Witcher 2, which has some numbers involved, but is generally more skill-based, is a different affair, because it's all on you as to whether you're able to, defeat the boss or not. It's not like a question of how much damage you're dealing. And I think that it's interesting that he says he has an easy time, because he also says, I played 150 hours of Xenoblade X and was like maxed out on all these things. And of course, you're not going to have trouble. Like, obviously, if you do that much playing of the game, no shit, you're going to be easy against these bosses. So do you feel, Bally, that it's punishing people for not grinding and not playing the game that way, and do you think it's fair?
I don't know. It's basically saying here's a bar of weight you have to lift, And then Farak is basically saying, yeah, I've gone away for 150 hours and pumped that iron all day, all night, all day, all night.
Yeah.
Come back to the first bar, which is the boss, and lifted it with one pinky.
Exactly.
And it's like, I don't know. And back to your point about RPG bosses, it is difficult to sometimes know whether you're failing just because you're a low level, or whether you're failing because you're doing the wrong thing. And I found that very frustrating about the first Xenoblade, and it was basically a combination of the two to some degree. And I think that you're right, Farak. Like, everyone does play RPGs very differently. I would say that most people probably don't play that many hours before facing the final boss. And
no, most people don't beat games, so most people don't get that far.
And games like Xenoblade X, Final Fantasy 13, and like, they don't get hype online about how difficult their final bosses are without having difficult final bosses. Like, if you read around enough online, you do get a good feeling for how difficult games are, and this will come back to the first question, which I'm sure we'll get to in a second. But like, you do get a good feeling for how difficult bosses are, and if you're like completely flattening the final boss of a game like Xenoblade Chronicles X, then yes, you are doing something very unusual, and you do basically own up to the unusual thing you're doing in playing 150 hours. So do I think it's fair that they make you grind? I'm not at the end of that game, Xenoblade X, yet, so I'm not going to judge that game necessarily, but I think that it's perfectly fair for JRPGs and RPGs to expect you to invest some time to get strong enough team, dudes, character, whatever you want to call them, and to take on the final boss or the final set of bosses, because that's just what JRPGs are. Like, that's that. If you don't have to be a high level, then you can beat the game without jumping through the necessary hoops that you could describe as being the necessary hoops of playing an RPG.
Yeah, it's a tough one, I think, because there are some people who really enjoy the act of grinding, and there's some, I don't know, I was doing this the other day. I was kind of grinding in Final Fantasy VII, even though I didn't need to, partly because I was like, I kind of want it to be a little bit easier for me along the line and not have to struggle so much. But also, I can put on a podcast, kind of chill out. It's kind of a brainless activity to level up. On the other hand, you have a game like Chrono Trigger where there is no superfluous enemies. Like, every enemy you encounter is kind of designed to give you a certain amount of experience, and you have a limited number of encounters generally, unless you're kind of going back of your own accord. And if you kind of go through all that content, you are basically perfectly pitched, perfectly leveled for every boss in that game. They're still challenging, but you can deal with them and you're equipped to do it, and there is never a single instance in that game where you have to grind. And I think more games can learn from that style of thought, where it's like, maybe I should build this in a sense that is still challenging but doesn't waste people's time, And I think that is, a lot of these other JRPGs tend to, go on for far too long and become laboured affairs.
And yeah, I agree. You definitely need to know what you're doing. Like, it's very different between whatever RPG you're playing. Like, for example, I talked about Pokémon Red just at the start of the show, and like, with that game, I had my 5 dudes, and I decided to have 5 dudes on purpose because I knew if I had 6 dudes, the XP would go to 6 dudes rather than 5 dudes. So if I have 5 dudes, the 5 dudes will level up quicker. I think 5 dudes is enough to try and get through, all the typings that you face in that game. And I decided, right, I'm going to go with 5 Pokemon, and I'm going to beat the game with 5, and it worked really well because I had prior knowledge to how a Pokemon game works and what you can do in that game.
Right, you have enough familiarity to where you could even go to the final area and be underleveled as you were.
Exactly.
And not have a difficult time doing it. And I think that is also a factor here, is some of these people who play JRPGs become intimate with the mechanics and the systems, and as a result they can kind of game it in a way that allows them to get through without necessarily having to level up that much. Like, exactly. I came across an instance of this in Final Fantasy VII just a couple of days ago, where I fought a boss for the first time which just killed me, and I was like, oh my god, I got game over in like first time in 30 hours. And I went back to it, I was like, okay, well, I didn't do this, and I need to make sure I have this like spell up before I do that. And I went into it a second time, and I just wipe the floor with him. And it's definitely a sense of like making sure you're knowing what you're doing as well as having the right numbers. So yeah, it's a hard one to tackle. It's definitely a difficult balance, and I feel like sometimes developers get too close to the game and feel like, oh, this is too easy because I've played this 100 times, and that distancing, when it comes to someone who's facing it and has never seen it before, means that you end up in a situation like Xenoblade X where it's the fucking worst thing in the world, and I thought it was terrible. So,
what game sections or final bosses have you found really easy that everyone found difficult?
So the most recent example of this that springs straight into my mind is Ori and the Blind Forest. Because, well, first of all, those bosses are unique because they're not actual bosses. They are escape sequences where it's literally a platforming challenge that's under a time constraint. So, like, the first one is this thing called the Ginzo tree, where this water is rushing up this tree as you basically frantically, like, platform your way up the top of it. And I absolutely fucking adored it. It's one of my favorite ways to kind of implement a boss challenge without like actively having something you're chipping a life bar away at. And I thought it was really well pitched in terms of difficulty. Personally, I absolutely love those kind of platforming challenges. I thrive on Super Meat Boy and this kind of like precision, like fast-paced, quick action. And I did it, and I was like, oh, that was so good. I want to do more of that. And they have more of that in the game. But I've been reading a lot of stuff online about how people found it so tough. Because it is a kind of point in the game where it spikes in difficulty. And if you're not very good at platforming, I can see how people would be frustrated by it. But for me, I just found it a breeze and really, like, kind of rattled my way through that game without having to worry about difficulty at all. But now that they're coming out with the definitive edition of the game, and it actually has an easy mode on it. So clearly they're kind of listening to people and thinking, yeah, we need to maybe tone this down for certain groups of people. They've also added a hard mode. So for people like me who thought it was a blast and maybe wanted it a bit more challenging, then hey, we've got that as well. But yeah, for me, that sticks out in my mind as I pretty much didn't have a problem, and other people were like, oh my god, I fucking hate this. So
I don't think I'm especially like talented at particular games, or there's never been like a one-off incident where I've like, oh, I absolutely nailed that and everyone struggled. I wouldn't say that there's much. There's definitely stuff where I've decided, right, I want to do this, and I'm not going to stop until I do this. And like, and the things that I've done when I'm in that mindset have been incredibly, impressive, and others haven't done them. Like for example, like getting a perfect in every single mission of Pilot Wings Resort on the 3DS. I just absolutely loved that game, and I've been in that mindset with Mario Kart in the past and lap times, and it's just that mode where I get in, and I've done it with other racing games like Wave Race and F-Zero, where I'm just like, I want to get a good, really, and normally it links to like some online forum, or the game is linked online somehow, like they used to do with Mario Kart on Wii. There was a time when I would do like the time trials and things to try and get high ranks and things, and I would just sit down with a game, and I could actually find myself getting incredibly close to some of the the best people in the world at that sort of thing. And yeah, I'm not going to claim it was easy. I'm claiming that I got there through a long grind to get good, like Twitch reflexes better at those games. So that was quite satisfying. It's kind of different to this question, I guess. But
well, he says like a final boss or game section. So yeah, it doesn't really matter.
When I played,
I think the one point of contention that we've been going back and forth on
is
Guacamelee, the boss, it's the one before
second
the final
last boss.
Javier Jaguar, who is an absolute fucking bastard cocksucker of a asshole. When I played him, and everyone else seemed to agree that boss was intensely difficult.
And you kept asking me throughout the whole game, like, how are you doing? How are you finding things? I'm like, oh yeah, I just beat some Jaguar guy. And you're like, oh, you beat him? Really? Like, how many times did it take you? And I was like, I don't know, like 2 or 3, I think. I was like, I think I went with 3. And you're like, what? You did it in 3 tries? I was like, yeah, it wasn't
the whole time I was waiting for you to get to him, and I really wanted to hear like your vitriol, like, oh my god, this was so hard. That's interesting because I think Javier Jaguar is actually a fair boss. Like, it's even when I played it back when it was really difficult, because we did some research and apparently they patched it because it was too difficult. And so Bally played the baby version. But I think that's an example of a boss that is difficult but fair. And I think the video that I did, the idea of frustrating bosses are bosses that feel unfair, that feel like I can't, like, I'm trying to do this thing and it's just not working because it feels cheap, and it feels like it's difficult to me for me to envisage a way of getting around it. Whereas that was very much pure skill, and it just took concentration. Yeah,
and I'm gonna throw this in there. I beat Super Metroid's Ridley with 4 energy tanks. I'm not gonna. I won't back down from that one as well. That's a big achievement in gaming that I'm very proud of. But
well, also very stupid because you could have just explored and got some goddamn energy tanks, Bally.
No. Wanted to do it.
See, this is why you want to play a Metroid Maker, because you never fucking explore Metroid games. God damn it.
Yeah, but that's the cool thing about Metroid is everyone plays them in different ways.
All right.
They're good.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Any instances of the other way round where it's easy for other people, but you found it really hard?
Easily Skyward Sword. I was just not good at like the bosses and fight Skyward Sword.
You weren't really good at anything in Skyward Sword, if I recall.
Yeah, most notably the final boss and the skeleton like mini boss of who comes up a couple of times.
It's a sand ship, I believe he appears.
Yeah, it's a sand ship and the final dungeon. It's both of them.
Yeah.
It just was hard. I just never got good at the sword stuff. I thought I was okay, but like I was nothing like as good as you and our friend Ali T, who would like, yeah, it's not too bad. I think that's one of the hardest final bosses of a Zelda game I've done, to be honest.
I think Skyward Sword is a uniquely challenging Zelda, actually. Generally, I just think it expects more of the player than Twilight Princess or Ocarina does, or even Wind Waker, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean the live action sword stuff is done really well, and they expect a lot from you for that reason, and it is implemented well. I just wasn't good at it. I think it's something I could probably get better with if I played that game again, but it's not exactly a game I'm dying to go back to anytime soon. But maybe sometime.
All right. Well, that's it for emails, right, Bally?
That's all the emails this week, but like I said at the top of the segment, do send in more. We always do need more, and you can send those emails to thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That's thisnintendolife@gmail.com. And
Indeed.
We are going to be back for the third and final segment in a short period of time. So don't go anywhere.
To this Nintendo Live. Bally has turned into a chicken. Over to you, Bally.
And welcome back to the show. We're here to talk about various things, but amongst them, of course, thanks to that lovely introduction from my me, who has a splendid voice.
Thank you, MBZ's me.
Yeah, no. Bally, how are you feeling as a chicken now? Are you feeling all right?
It's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Anyway, let's talk about what the hell we're talking about. Bally, what the hell are we talking about?
This crazy little thing called Miitomo.
Called love?
Not love, Miitomo.
Ah, well. You see, I would love to see Freddie Mercury and Miitomo, but unfortunately, it's not going to happen. So, unless someone impersonates... I think they were talking about this on RFN, about how, like, it would be interesting if... Or it's a weird scenario where maybe people will impersonate people, but because of the fact that it's all done through Twitter and everything, it's hard to do that, right?
Yeah, but you could definitely set up fake accounts and...
You could do that.
Yeah.
Some parody accounts like you have on Twitter. But yeah, I think we just want to have a general chat about the My Nintendo stuff and Miitomo, or in the words of the app itself, Miitomo, as we have alluded to before, because for some weird reason, the Miis pronounce the app in the way that isn't being marketed by Nintendo itself, which is a little strange. But hey, maybe we have just come onto a discovery that all Miis are actually British, and I think that, very, very good discovery to come to. Bally, how do you feel about the My Nintendo program? How about we kind of start there? Because all this is very interlinked, and it's interesting, I think, because you take a look at that page, and you have the gold coins, which are there for if you make purchases. The gold coins very much seem as a replacement to the Digital Deluxe program, right? So you spend a certain amount of money in the eShop, you get a certain amount back, and it doesn't seem as open as Digital Deluxe because that was straight up cash or like eShop credit that you had.
Yeah.
Whereas this is like into a point system that then you can spend on a rotating number of games. Do you think that this is a good compromise they've come to? Would you prefer it the other way? How do you feel about the gold coin system implementation?
I think it's quite a lot to take in initially. I definitely, when you first showed me, I was like, okay, why are there 3 currencies?
Yeah.
How do I get these 3 currencies, and what can I spend these 3 currencies on? And then, but once you're past that layer of, oh my god, what's going on, it actually makes a lot of sense, where those gold coins you can basically only get at this point in time, I believe, through game purchases, digital game purchases. So I think it's great. I think it's a really cool idea. I think it's encouraging you to go digital, and whether Nintendo's wanting you to do that on purpose or not, I'm not sure necessarily, but it's certainly like synchronizing. We've said this on the show so many times, like they're just becoming more unified in what they do. And this is like a real sort of staple in that process, and like before the NX comes out, etc. It's a real positive step forward to say, hey, look, you can get discounts on these games, you can actually get these other points, and you can get... It feels like if you're someone like us who buys a lot of Nintendo games, you're really getting some really cool bonus free stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely a little maybe confusing to the layperson who isn't, into games or Nintendo that much, but I think
that's maybe not who this is aimed at.
Right, I think it's a simple enough system for the people who already, own the platforms and know what they're doing with them. Yeah, for sure. Like, I think all this whole My Nintendo side thing is definitely not your regular Joe person who's going to go out and buy, an NX or whatever. They're not going to pay attention to this probably. But that depends on whether they implement the missions, which is a new part of, the whole My Nintendo experience, into the games themselves, right? Because, of course, like over the past, Microsoft and Sony implemented their achievement systems with achievements on 360, and then Sony have trophies. And Steam has achievements as well, though people don't seem to care about them there. Those, to me, always felt so hollow. They were a cool way of making you play the game in a certain, way, I guess, that you don't usually, and that on its own is neat, but I don't think that they really do anything useful aside from that, and as a result I've found them kind of, pretty pointless. Whereas if we have the prospect of these missions on Nintendo platforms actually being useful and providing you with the potential to gain points, which then leads into you getting free games or themes or whatever, that is instantly more appetizing to me, because then I decide, okay, maybe I am going to go after all the missions in this game because I will reap the benefit financially as a result. Do you think that will happen? Do you feel like the missions are a subtle tell as to how the NX will operate with other games?
I think it would be a really cool avenue to try out for Nintendo. It definitely has its negatives. I definitely think that the idea of playing games in certain ways or doing parts of games that you wouldn't otherwise normally do in order to get stuff might feel weird or like a chore or like work, I'm sure we might not do that, but there might be times where we're like, oh, I've got to get this achievement to unlock this game download, and the process to get there might not be a whole lot of fun and might be really, really difficult.
Well, I don't know. I think there are lots of people who are unlike us who really go for 100% in everything, and they do that just for the joy of getting 100%, Like, I feel...
Yeah, like me and Pilot Wings.
This actually works as a system that benefits those types of people, and it encourages people who maybe aren't, persuaded that way to actually have tangible benefits for doing so.
Those who are getting more out of their games ultimately get more games for getting more out of their games.
You get more
cool
for getting more.
Yeah, I think it would be really interesting, and it'd be interesting to see if they can do this with games that come out before the NX, or whether they try to first implement it first of all with something NX related.
Totally. So the other coin systems we have are the Platinum coins and then Miitomo points. Now, this is something that I'm interested in and maybe a little confused about. The fact that Miitomo itself has this whole kind of case of coins on its own, it's separate, like it's distinct. Is this going to be kind of a centerpiece of Nintendo's points program? Is Miitomo continuing there at the center? Or do you think that that's just there as a placeholder and that it will become, separate game coins for separate games and it'll be shifted around? Because at the moment, like, it's given equal significance to the other two. And I don't know that if Miitomo kind of drops off and becomes less popular, that will necessarily be the case for the future.
Yeah, I agree. I think it might be a placeholder, and Nintendo just waiting to see how Miitomo does. I don't know how it's doing it. I don't know if we've had statistics yet on that. But
well, it's definitely been at the top of the iTunes charts in terms of number of downloads. That, of course, is not grossing. Top grossing is a completely different arena, and they haven't been doing particularly well. They've been doing fine, I think. But that's definitely to do with the way that they are monetizing Miitomo at the moment.
Yeah, it really feels like Miitomo is just, let's get the name out there and see what happens. It's like get the Nintendo name out there and get the Mii's out there, of course, which is so familiar to people. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think the critical role of Miitomo is to get people into the Nintendo ecosystem, to have them make accounts, and to build up their kind of player base through that.
So what do you think about Miitomo?
Yeah, let's talk about the app itself. So it came out like a couple of weeks ago now, I think. We were just last time we did the show, it was just about to come out, and so we've had quite some time with it now. I have to say I haven't put a huge amount of time into it because I feel like it's kind of hard to put a lot of time into it. That's for a few reasons. So I think when you start out, the process of getting your Mii on there was a little bit of a fucking faff. If I wanted to get my one on there, I tried to do it through a system that was direct, and it said, no, this Mii is uncopyable. Then I was like, okay, I'm going to do a QR code. QR coded it. It says, no, it's uncopyable. So I looked it up, and apparently, if you create the Mii and make it unshareable, then you can't move it across. So I had to go into my 3DS, change the settings, make sure it was shareable, get it on. So already, like, my first impression, not great, unfortunately, with this implementation. Although I am a hardcore Nintendo user, so I want all this stuff to be synced across. I imagine if you're just a casual person downloading this and you just want to make a Mii, like, you can just use the photo application and do it pretty easily. So I wouldn't say that's really a stumbling block. It's just a thing that I found annoying. And then you start off and start kind of answering questions, adding people, which is a little slow to start with because, some people weren't on it yet and it had just come out, so I didn't have too many people on there. And it's all done through Twitter and Facebook and stuff, but it's all to do with kind of mutual following. So if you are following someone on Twitter and they're also following you, then you can send them a request. Otherwise, it's kind of impossible to do so, which makes I think it's neat because it makes it more private and it means you maybe feel more free in your answers and everything, but it also means that you're not given a larger sample size. So when it comes to people liking stuff and commenting on it, it feels like there just isn't as much happening because your circle is so limited,
Yeah, it's a weird one. My first impressions, it kind of was what I expected it would be, to be honest. It's incredibly well polished, like great musical themes and stuff like Nintendo always do on random apps and software inside the systems of the Wii U and the 3DS and things on random eShops and things. It right, sounds great.
Yeah.
But I've barely played it. I think I've played it like twice or three times.
I don't think you can even say you've played it.
Yeah,
that's not really what it is.
I've just
used it.
And I don't feel much satisfaction or enjoy. No, it is enjoyable. It's funny just having someone read out an answer in your funny me's voice and see what happens. But it's just weird. It's really weird. I don't know how I feel about it, to be honest. It's not aimed at me, so I'm not going to come down hard on it, but it's a thing, and it's there, and it's funny for a bit.
So yeah, I think you hit on the point. Is like the most interesting thing about Miitomo for me is the me voices and the way that they say stuff. And of course, we kick off the segment with me fucking saying some shit that my me is going to say, and the real crucial part is that you can say whatever the hell you like, and the me will read it out. There is zero filter, zero kind of like curation of swearing or any kind of vulgarity. Nintendo have signed off on this as a product under their name.
Yeah.
And I am shocked. I am stunned that they allowed this. And I wonder, is this a thing they've talked over with DNA and maybe they have persuaded them that it would be a good idea to do that? Or maybe Nintendo are getting more lax? I don't know. Maybe because it's an application for phones and for tablets, they know that their demographic is likely older and therefore would be able to kind of use it without having to worry about that stuff. And also maybe the idea that it's all within friends and within friend groups that you personally curate, you're able to do that and it's not kind of going out to the wider world. What do you think's gone down here, Bally? What get your Sherlock Holmes hat out. How has Nintendo allowed this?
I have no idea, because remember the swap note software?
Yes.
And there was that story that someone had been what happened to them? Were they murdered or something?
No, I don't think it was that bad. It was something in Japan, but it was like someone was using it for solicitation of some kind. I can't remember what it was.
But yeah, there was something bad, and Nintendo was like, right, shut down SwapNote, all done. And SwapNote was, you needed to have friend codes amongst friends, and then it was just squiggles on, a touchscreen. Pictures. It seemed pretty harmless, and for
extremely innocuous, extremely harmless.
And this was I want to say 2 years ago, maybe less than that, a year and a half ago or so, and they shut this down. And now we have them where you only have to be following each other on Twitter or Facebook friends, and you can be as vulgar and vile as anyone wants, and it's weird. I mean, Facebook and Twitter they've already sort of, how do you describe it? Sold their soul to the devil, you might say. They've already accepted, right, we're a platform and vulgar people are going to communicate to each other on this platform. We can only take so much responsibility. And to be honest, Facebook and Twitter, especially Twitter, is coming under so much pressure when it comes to, it's more to do with trolling and
harassment.
Harassment, exactly. But now Nintendo, it feels, have put themselves in that realm. Obviously, Miitomo is not, the same user base as Facebook or Twitter.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
By billions, but I think they are susceptible to criticism for this, and I can really see them either standing their ground and saying, no, this is the new Nintendo, this is how we're going to do things from now on, this is the way we want to go with the NX, we're going to be a bit more open and defend ourselves as a platform and not a moderator. And that's just so unlike Nintendo. Like, it's either they're going to do that or they're just going to backtrack entirely. And I can't see them wanting to backtrack entirely on their very first mobile app. Like, that would be a terrible news story. So they must have thought about this, but they've just decided to take the leap of faith, I guess.
I think they might have actually decided to allow that sort of stuff as a result of fear that they would be criticized for having it be too sanitized and therefore boring.
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of the joy of Miitomo is these cute, like, very innocent characters just saying the most obscene stuff and it being absolutely hilarious. Like, I think they definitely wanted to create that weird feeling, and I think it was successful because, like, loads of people were talking about how crazy and funny it was that they allowed it, you know?
Yeah, it's weird, and that is what Miitomo is from top to bottom. It is weird. It is very
strange,
unusual, and it's so Nintendo. And I think it's overall an interesting first step for Nintendo, and I'm really intrigued to see where they go next. I mean, I've been having horrendous problems with my phone, I should add, so it just destroys battery.
Yeah, number one, it destroys battery. Number two, it takes up a fuck ton of space. So if you have like a low gigabyte phone or tablet, then say goodbye to any gigabytes that you had before. It definitely has a lot of issues that are not sensitive to the kind of utility of the platform, right? And I think that that's something they should probably work out for future projects. But that's the thing, like, Nintendo pride themselves on high quality production values. This game runs at 60 frames a second and it's just guys just sitting in a room, like, you don't need it at 60 FPS, and yet, like, they have that bar of quality that they want to hit. I don't know if that'll hurt them at all in the long run.
But I mean, so let's take a step back and sort of maybe wrap up. Like, between Miitomo and My Nintendo, they came out the same day, right? Didn't they?
Yeah, they launched together.
With the NX potentially end of this year, start of next year, we don't know yet. How are we feeling going forward? Like, is this a good first step? Is this what we wanted?
I think My Nintendo is a positive first step. It certainly shows a unifying of their systems and their products in a way that feels safe going forward for the future. Having the ability to get rewards that go across stuff that you've earned on mobile and stuff that you've got just through visiting the eShop or logging into Miiverse or whatever. Like, it feels like all these connections are being made, and it seems like it's set up for the NX to just, like, slide right into its slot and coexist in the ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully that means that we will have a much smoother experience through our Nintendo products overall.
Yeah, definitely. And it feels like it's rewarding you for being a committed hardcore Nintendo fan. So if, you said, going on the eShop every day, checking out Miiverse, playing games, completing games, buying games, all these things, like going on Miitomo, doing this.
It's like they're gamifying just being a person who consumes their content, right?
Exactly.
Like they are making this a game, and even to the point where you start My Nintendo and it gamifies you getting and spending points. Like, they know what they're doing when it comes to systems and letting people understand how they work. So that's really cool.
I am concerned. Well, maybe in the long run I'm not concerned. In the short run I am concerned. And what I mean about digital. So what I mean by this is I would absolutely love the NX to just go whole hog, do digital only, don't have to worry about it, can do, when games come out, just download stuff at midnight. I'd love that world. And that's a world we can already access, but it's not it's not as affordable, let's just say, because obviously hard copies are cheaper at the moment for us, especially in the UK on
Oh
Amazon.
god, yeah, UK, it's a no-show whatsoever.
So,
like, it's so fucking terrible here.
And I want to pick up Star Fox Zero, like end of this month, or next week actually, and I don't know what I should do. I need to find out how many coins would I get if I got it digitally, and plus like the added Star Fox Guard. I don't know the best bundle to get that, whether I get one digitally, one hard copy. I need to check Amazon. I just want to get to the stage where I don't have to think about it and they just funnel me in one direction and they just say, right, digital only, or still keep it 2-tier but have Amazon cheaper or something. And like, I just wish they were more similar, and that's one area that's maybe outside of Nintendo's control. I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I do think that it's a good step to make, and I'm glad it's being set up before we get to NX. I'm glad that there are foundations set in stone so that we can worry less about, like, oh god, what's the account system going to be? Oh, is this all going to work? Is it not? So far, it links nicely. I just logged in with my Nintendo Network ID, and that's kind of got my whole profile sorted. And Miitomo may be a little bit of a bust, but I think it's good for Nintendo to get users and have them potentially to market new stuff to, and therefore if they can do well in that mobile market, maybe push people over the edge onto their platform. I don't know if that'll work or not, but I don't think Miitomo as a game is very satisfying because it's not a game. I guess like there are game elements like Miitomo Drop, which is not even bad. It's like a pachinko, like it's awful. But hey, it's kind of a fun thing. Like when I first got it, I was sitting there for like an hour just kind of tapping away and answering questions. My sister was like sitting next to me and she was like, oh my god, you've been doing that for ages. I'm like, oh shit, I have. Like, looked at the clock. It's like, oh my god, I've been sitting here for an hour just ditzing around with this stupid thing. So it had me for that like one day, and then on and off I've just been like, I'll check in, get a gift, which I then won't use, and I don't know, have I added a new person? I guess. I can't be bothered to answer questions, I turn it off. So
yeah,
it has become just useless very quickly, but I kind of expected that, in all honesty.
Yeah, it's fine. And like you said, my Nintendo is a lot more exciting looking forward.
Absolutely, it's a lot more exciting.
So yeah, looking forward to where that goes.
We shall see. Will that be soon? Maybe. Who knows? Well, this is the end of the show. There we go. This was a production of myself and Bally, and we are going to pimp ourselves as per the usual at the end of the show. So Bally, pimp yourself. Where can they be finding you on the Twitters and things?
Please find me on Twitter. My handle is at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91. That is also my name on the Miiverse, as I am playing a Wii Virtual Console game. I can't post on the Miiverse, so that's a bit
I was thinking about that. I was like, oh shit, you're gonna have to take pictures and send them to Twitter instead.
Yeah, it's really annoying, but
old school.
It's old school, but yeah, follow me on there. That'd be nice.
All right, good stuff. You can find me on the Twitters as well. I'm at Lordnbz. That's my name on the Miiverse also. And we can be found on Twitter as a podcast, which is at TNL Podcast. We put things out there, like some videos and things, and extra weird stuff we do on the side. So keep an eye out on it for updates and things about the show generally. Bally, where can people send us emails? Because we need some emails for them to send to us.
We need some emails. Please send your emails to thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com.
Brilliant. You can find the show. We are on iTunes. We are on Stitcher. On YouTube. Generally, Mondays on iTunes, Wednesdays on YouTube, if I remember, which sometimes I do. And that is pretty much us. That's what we do. You can review us on iTunes if you like. That's lovely. We'd be very thankful if you did that and sent us a nice few words to help us along our way. That's going to be that. Any closing words, Bally? Anything planned? I don't know. I don't think there's anything much going on apart from just
I
trucking
don't know.
along.
I think gaming can sometimes be tougher to do when the weather is getting better.
Yeah, exactly. You're pushing yourself outside a bit more.
You gotta push yourself outside.
Yeah, you
roll
do.
out of
Wow.
bed and roll outside.
Exactly.
And then roll back inside.
But we'll make sure to do some games, of course, along the way. So yeah, we'll be back next time with some more of that stuff and some more of us. So thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Goodbye, everyone. The musical interludes used on today's show were Fighting from Final Fantasy VII and Cosmo Canyon, also from Final Fantasy VII. Copyright Squaresoft, 1997. People derogatorily, fuck's sake. Okay, shut the door.
For God's sake.
Right, ready? Mom!
I did that deliberately.
What? Yeah! No shit! No shit!
Barely there.
Yes!
Little
For God's sake!
You can hear me.
Yes!
I'm just having
I'm
fun.
trying to synchronize an audio track here. This is how we do it in the studio as professionals.
Well, so you better hire a studio.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, can I charge you studio
No,
rates
no,
now?
you can't.
Good point.
No,
Should
thank
charge
you.
Studio rates.
No.
I think so.
I think so.
Yeah, you want silence, you need to
Oh
pay.
my god. Shut the door. Alright. Ready?
Yes.